If all you've been doing is creating these negative experiences around exercise, and every time you do it, you feel like it's a chore and you hate every second of it and you're uncomfortable, you're going to create a very negative association with exercise. And then it's no question that you're not going to look forward to doing it again. Welcome to the Live Unrestricted podcast, a show where you'll learn how to heal your relationship with food and your body so that you can focus your time and energy on more important things like your personal growth. I'm your host, Sabrina Magna, food freedom coach, and my mission is to help make your life happier and healthier without stress, overwhelm, or guilt about food. If you love the show, please do go out and share it. And if you're looking for support with your relationship with food, details about my programs are in the show notes. Thanks for spending time with me today. Now let's jump in. Oh, I am so excited to be behind the mic once again. I took a few weeks off from recording podcasts and I had batched them all ahead of time because I was focusing on serving the new members inside Food Freedom Academy. And we have a lot of exciting projects coming up in the business. So I am just so grateful to be back behind the mic because I love recording these podcasts for you. And today we're talking about a topic that is so near and dear to my heart because, as maybe you've heard from my story, I used to struggle with a very unhealthy relationship with exercise. And this was fueled, of course, by a very unhealthy relationship with my body. And moving my body, working out, exercising was all tied into trying to shrink my body, trying to burn as many calories as possible, trying to earn my food. And a lot of it was revolved around not having guilt or reducing anxiety around my body. And I know that I'm not alone in this. And I know that when you're struggling with body image and dieting, and especially now with the fitness industry being very loud on social media, it could be positive depending on who you follow and the kind of messages that you take in. But Luke and I talk about this a lot because he is a trainer. He has been in the fitness industry for years now. And unfortunately, the fitness industry can be really toxic. There's a lot of false advertising that you see. So you'll see people who are on steroids or who spend literally their entire lives at the gym, and they'll try to convince you that if you just work out like them or eat like them, then you'll look like them. And it creates so much comparison and this very skewed and flawed relationship with exercise. There's going to be a lot of influencers who will promote the idea that exercise is used for weight loss. And especially, like I said, if you're struggling with body image, then there can be a very inconsistent, unbalanced, and unhealthy relationship that gets formed with exercise. I know for me, when I look at my current relationship with exercise, I'm so thankful that I'm able to take days off, not exercise, and not feel bad about it, and not check my Fitbit every 30 seconds to see how many calories I've burned or how many steps I've taken that day, because that used to be me. So much guilt and anxiety on days that I would have to take the day off. And most of the time I wouldn't. I would push through even if my body was in shambles, in so much pain. I was so sore. I was exhausted because my relationship with exercise was so complicated. And I truly believe that if I took a day off from exercise, I would gain weight, or I would become unhealthy. And for a solid 3 years, I think, I took pride in the fact that I never went more than 2 days off from exercise, which I look back on it now and it makes me so sad because it was part of my identity. It was part of my identity to never skip the gym, to leave a party early so that I could be at the gym at 6 a.m. the next day. And I thought that all of these things that I was doing
working out, trying to lose weight, and taking on this identity as the quote unquote fit friend, I thought it would make me feel something. I thought it would make me feel happy or made me feel like I belonged, or it would make people like me more. I truly don't know what I thought it was going to bring me, because the truth is that I was doing all of these things. I was the quote unquote fit friend, and I was at the gym all the time, and I was losing weight. And yet I was more and more and more unhappy, because there's such a cost that comes along with that. There's such a cost to missing out on connection, social connection, being around people you love, being in the present. And when you have this complicated relationship with exercise, it could be on one end, kind of like what I had, an exercise addiction where there's a lot of guilt for taking a day off. But you could also experience a lot of inconsistency where you're either going all in and you're doing the extreme workouts and you're weightlifting and you're maybe even on a meal plan and you're giving it your full attention and you're almost making it a full-time project. But then eventually that's unsustainable. Maybe you have kids or you work full time and you just have a life, and you realize that, or either you realize or you just naturally fall off the wagon, that you can't do that for the rest of your life. It's not sustainable. I look back on how much I worked out when I was in university, and I would spend like 1 to 2 hours at the gym every day. And I look at my life now, I own a business, I have all these clients, I'm in a relationship, I have my social life, I have my family, I have my hobbies, I have so much going on. And so for me now, a workout is not going to be longer than like 30, 35 minutes in the morning. And I'm perfectly content and happy with that. And I don't see it as slacking off or doing something wrong. It's just what fits into my life. But I look back on how I used to think exercise needed to be like super intense, sweating every single time. And that would have never fit into my life now. And so with all of this in mind, I wanted to do an episode on your relationship with exercise, because exercise is so powerful. It's powerful in helping with your mental health and your physical health and creating connection. But the meaning of exercise has been taken over by the fitness and the diet industry. And people will approach it from the completely wrong mindset. And that creates a huge barrier to exercise. So I want to talk about how to have a healthy relationship with exercise so that you can rediscover the joy of moving your body, the benefits on your mindset, on your mental and emotional health, on productivity, on the energy and the vitality that it gives you. So I decided not to do this podcast alone, and I brought in Megan Dahlman, personal trainer, nutrition coach, host of the top-rated podcast, Self-Care Simplified. So a little bit about Megan. In her 17 years of training professionally, she has become the sought-after trainer for women over 40 who want to feel their physical best for years to come. So with a degree in exercise science and as a certified strength and conditioning specialist, she has an uncanny ability for taking complicated aspects about your body and making them simple, doable, and actually sustainable. And what I love about Megan is that she has a no-nonsense, realistic approach to exercise and moving your body. And that's what is so important. I'm not going to bring on a guest who's going to tell you that there's only one kind of exercise that you should be doing or give you some unsustainable plan that you're only going to be able to stick to for maybe 2 weeks before falling off the wagon. We are having a conversation about how to make joyful movement part of your life in a way that doesn't feel hard, complicated, overwhelming, or like a chore. So I'm going to play that interview for you. Enjoy. Well, thank you so much, Megan, for being here. And I'm just going to jump right into it.
So, we're going to talk about our relationship with exercise today and how to overcome perfectionism and all or nothing thinking, something that a lot of the women in my community struggle with. So, in your 17 years of training professionally, what have you found is the number one thing that the women, because I know that you work specifically with women as well, the women in your community and your clients struggle with the most when it comes to exercise?
Hands down, it's that go hard or go home mentality. It's kind of that if I'm going to show up and do it, I'm going to go all in. I think as women, we like to be super women. We're like, if I'm going to do something, if I'm going to commit to doing something, I'm going to do it perfectly. I'm going to do all of the things and I'm going to do all of the things from day one. And most, pretty much every fitness or nutrition program out there, like that is the essence of it. You get handed a workout program or nutrition program. It's like, here are all of your rules. Here are all of the things that we're going to help you go all in with. And you get that like immediate boost of pride and this sense of accomplishment. A lot of us women are box checkers. We like to check off that to-do list and feel this feeling of I'm doing it, I'm checking the things off. And being results driven is great. Getting that to-do list done is great. But going all in, most of the time, 99.9% of the time, it's simply not sustainable.
Yeah.
And so that is the history that women have, especially with workout programs, is that kind of like the diet roller coaster, right? That most of your listeners are used to. It's like, I'm going to go in, I'm going to do all of these really high, intense, extreme things. And then I'm off of the workout wagon again for the next month because it was just so hard, too difficult to sustain that level of effort. And so we feel frustrated and discouraged with the whole process. So hands down, the biggest thing that women deal with is that all in mentality for sure.
Yeah, and I love that you bring that up because I was actually just listening to a podcast this morning, and it was a podcast talking about your relationship with alcohol. But what was interesting is I'm personally not a drinker, but what they were explaining in the podcast is that your relationship with alcohol is kind of the same as your relationship with everything that you do when it comes to food and exercise and getting things done for your career. And the problem is not so much the relationship with the thing itself, but the relationship that we have with commitment, which was a way that I had never really looked at it before, which is really we have this commitment that we set for ourselves. And we think if I'm going to achieve this commitment and if I'm really going to be committed to this goal, then commitment means I put everything else on hold. And if I'm telling myself I'm going to start exercising, I'm going to make it a full-time project.
Right. Right. And that's not real commitment. Like that's an extreme version of what commitment really looks like. Commitment can look like so many things. Like you can say, I commit to walking 5 days or walking for 5 minutes a day. Like that is very valuable commitment. Or you can say, I'm going to commit to doing some stretches in the evening that I know would make my back and hips feel so much better. And that is my sense of commitment. And that's far more sustainable and far more, we can build on that. That's something that you can build on over time. That's going to get the ball rolling. It's going to get your habits jump started. But you're so right. We have this idea of like, well, if I'm going to commit to something, it's got to be something big. It's got to be that, like with alcohol, it's that like cold turkey approach of had it all out in my life and never touch it at all. And some people that is important to do if it's actually an issue. But honestly, I think with exercise, that's never a good method. It's never a good idea to say, I'm going to go all in and commit to doing 5 days a week of 45-minute long workouts. And unless I do that, unless I'm sweating, it's not worth it.
Yeah.
And that mentality is so damaging. It really is for our long-term success.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's the unless I'm sweating or unless I burn. For me personally, I used to struggle with an eating disorder, and there was all of these
Mhm.
criterias for a workout to count. So if I hit
Yeah.
500 calories on my Fitbit, then that was a workout that was worthwhile. If you sweat, if you hit a certain amount of steps or a certain
Right.
kilometer distance on your run, it like we have all of these rules that we set even when it comes to exercise counting. And I would love to know your opinion on why do you think it's so hard for people to start slow?
Because it doesn't feel like it will move the needle enough. Often, when we begin a fitness program, we have an end goal in mind. Same with like starting a diet, right? Nobody's going to start a diet for no reason. It's like, I've got 30 pounds I want to lose. Or so with fitness, it's like, I have this end goal in mind. This is not just to be a healthier person. This is like, I want results. And we feel like the starting slow method is simply not going to do enough to get us the results. But we don't realize that results take long time, like real sustainable results, that it takes a while. And if you want to still be here doing the thing a year from now, what you do today is going to impact that. What you choose to do right now and say, I'm going to start slow. I'm going to be what I like to say, team tortoise. you know,
Yes.
when you're looking at the classic story of the tortoise and the hare, we all know what happens to the hare that rushes off the starting line and goes as fast as possible, and he burns out. And it's ultimately tortoise who wins, who actually gets the results. It's not flashy, it's not exciting, it feels a little embarrassing that you're doing it slow, especially when all of the people in your life are going to these really intense boot camp classes, you know, super extreme CrossFit style workouts, and they're getting these dramatic results in just 30 days. It's hard to keep your blinders on and say, I'm okay with doing the slow and steady method. And you have to really trust the process more than ever. And so that is why it's so difficult to do slow and steady, but just keep coming back and ask yourself, what is the wise thing to do here? What is wisdom saying? I'm a mature adult and I want to do this the wise method.
Hmm.
And that is always, always, always going to be the team tortoise method.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah, and one thing that I talk a lot about is the difference between extrinsic and intrinsic motivation when it comes to exercise.
Yes.
Because especially in my community, there's a lot of chronic dieters who have this
Mhm.
relationship with exercise of I'm going to start working out so that I can lose weight. And when they don't see those results and there isn't that intrinsic motivation of, I love the way it makes me feel. For me personally, I work out first thing in the morning, not because I'm trying to change my body, but because it makes me more energetic. It wakes me up. It usually makes my day a lot more productive, which is something that happens internally. So, what would you say when it comes to extrinsic and intrinsic motivation, how those come into play when it comes to staying consistent with exercise?
I think it's okay if extrinsic motivation helps you get the ball rolling initially, because with fitness, like it can be uncomfortable at first. That's why I always recommend start out with something that feels good. Don't start out with something that hurts, something that's going to make you sore for 5 days. Like that is really hard to find that intrinsic drive to show up again. So, most often, what will push you to get started is this extrinsic motivator, something that's outside of your inner drive that's compelling you to do it. That is okay. But at some point, the switch has to happen. It has to become internalized. It has to become something that you really enjoy doing. And you have to get to the point where it's like, honestly, this feels so good. I don't care. I kind of stopped caring about the results. I just really enjoy how it feels right now in this moment. This is now becoming like my medicine. It feels so life giving and energizing. And I can't imagine not doing this. And it can take a long time for it to become intrinsic.
Mhm.
And those people that are at the starting line, usually we observe everyone that is a lot further down the road and it's become very intrinsic. They have that inner drive. We're like, I wish it was like that for me because they look like they make it look so easy. You're like, oh gosh, they just show up every day. They don't seem to have an issue with showing up every day. They never miss a workout. Why do they make it look so easy? It probably took that person a long time for that motivation to turn internal. And I think it's helpful to know that it might not be intrinsic at the beginning, and
Mhm.
that's okay. And that's why, when in the beginning, it has to be something that's not extreme. It can't be that 5 days a week of 45-minute long workouts because it's not intrinsic yet. It doesn't feel good yet.
Mhm.
You will not want to do that. You're just not going to want to do that. And so, when you're at the beginning and trying to get your fitness habits going, make sure there are things that, oh, okay, I'm so used to this being uncomfortable, but boy, that stretch actually felt really good. All we did were a couple squats. All I had to do was go for a 5-minute walk. That's not so bad. That's not so bad. And so you start to change the kind of the script that's playing in your mind about what fitness actually is for you, and it starts to become more of a positive thing, and that's where it starts to become more of an intrinsic motivator.
Yes, I think that's so important. And you mentioned something that I keep relating back to. So I'm currently going through a process of changing my mindset around the chronic pain that I have. So I have
Mhm.
scoliosis, and so I struggle with chronic pain, and a lot of it is my relationship with pain because I've learned
Yeah.
to be really afraid of any sensation in my back. And as I've been learning, I've been able to make a lot of connections to the way that we think about exercise and the way that we think about food. And one of the things that I've been taught is that you have to create as many positive experiences with your body. So for me, if I can feel as good as possible, as often as possible, I can rewire my relationship with the pain that I have. And it kind of is the same thing when it comes to exercise. If all you've been doing is creating these negative experiences around exercise, and every time you do it, you feel like it's a chore and you hate every second of it and you're uncomfortable. And there are going to be points where it's going to get uncomfortable. But if you try to get super uncomfortable right from the beginning and it's miserable and you don't enjoy it, you're going to create a very negative association with exercise. And then it's no question that you're not going to look forward to doing it again.
For sure. And so many of us have this almost like PTSD when it comes with working out and signing up for workout programs. And it's like the last time I did something, it was so traumatic. I injured myself. I couldn't walk for 5 days, or it triggered like this adrenal fatigue in me where it was so stressful for my body. And so that is our association with exercise. And so there's like this something inside of us. It's like, there's nothing in me that wants to do that. There's nothing like I have to muster up so much motivation to do something that when I think about exercise, I think workout, I think sweat, I think pain, I think misery, I think time consuming. I think like all of these really negative associations with it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like we almost have to rewrite the the script. We have to go back to the drawing board and say like, okay, those were all the things you may have experienced at some point, and that was really unfortunate. Like that I'm so sorry that you had to experience that. But the good news is that it's not all like that. And there is another way to go about fitness where you start to have very positive associations with it. And you can start to say things like, feel good, feel loose and limber and pain free and strong and capable and energetic and more of these positive associations. And I always encourage women to say, hey, what if we even dropped certain words out of our vocabulary? What if we stopped calling it a workout altogether? What if we started calling it my movement session? You
Yes.
know, like there's something about like yoga and other types of more mellow routines that people have a far more positive association with when it's like, oh, that's like I'm doing my like stress relieving movement session. It's like,
Mhm.
what if we called what we normally call a workout? What if we called it that? It's like, oh, I need to carve out some time today to do my stress relieving movements that make me strong and have energy and remove my pain. It's like, whoa, now I really want to do that. Now I'm going to make every effort to carve out that time in my day to make sure that happens. Like I'm really looking forward to that.
Mhm.
And so stop, like scroll back and think, what do good movements actually, how do they actually make me feel?
Mhm.
What are those positive things? And I'm sure you do this too, Sabrina, with the food side. It's like, let's create so many positive associations with good healthy food and how that really makes you feel in the moment. Let's do that also with fitness. How does that hamstring stretch make you feel?
Mhm.
How does that squat, when you really sit into your hips and you feel your hips like finally open up? And how does that, thoracic rotational stretch, like, whoa, like your shoulders, man, those have been locked for days and now they just released and you feel like fresh and young again. And you don't feel like you're a crotchety old person. Like, really sit with those positive feelings. And it can really change your entire perspective on what fitness is for you personally. It's not this traumatic experience anymore. It's a very positive one.
Yes, and I love what you mentioned about changing the words that you use around it. In when I'm working with clients, I refer to it as joyful movement, and
I
I
love that. That's so
yeah.
good.
Yeah, and I started referring to myself as someone who moves every morning. And just having that kind of identity and using that kind of language, what I have found for myself, it has allowed me to be very fluid and flexible in what that
Mm-hmm.
movement looks for me. Because in the past, especially when you have a history of disordered eating or an eating disorder or chronic dieting, you live by rules and you live by rigidity. And so when I started seeing myself as, oh, I'm just someone who moves every day, that reduces that anxiety of waking up in the morning and maybe not feeling like a doing a full-on hit workout or strength workout, but I can go for a walk or I can stretch or I can foam roll and I can do something that feels good for me that still aligns with that movement everyday lifestyle, but isn't as intimidating as doing a full-on workout.
Absolutely. It's more of it pulls it out of the sphere of like I'm having to work out to kind of punish myself in a way. And I like to say, especially those of us who've come from like a disordered eating background, we see food as an enemy, right? Food is the thing that we're trying to avoid at all costs. It's an enemy. And we tend to use exercise as the weapon to fight that enemy. It's like I ate too much, so I better work out a little extra hard. Like I went over my calorie count, and so I need to now make up for it with 20 burpees.
Yeah.
And it's like exercise has somehow become so distorted in our mind, as much as food has become distorted, where exercise is now this weapon that we're wielding. Like to try to punish our body into submission. And that is not at all what it is. It's like, no, you are a strong woman who has muscles and ligaments and tendons and connective tissues that when they move freely, what that does to your confidence, like when you can feel your core muscles engaging, when you pick up something heavy, that feels powerful. Like that's empowering. This is far more than just this like calorie output. This is more of I have a body that moves and functions the way it was always designed to. And that feels really, really good. And you just start to become someone like, I just want to move every day to experience my body.
Yeah.
And I know with a lot of women that have this like traumatic association with fitness, like feeling those feelings and sitting in that place can be really challenging to be like, I need to go through these few movements. I'm not even going to say exercises, like these few feel good, like joy filled movements, and really notice the joy in them and notice how good it feels, and try my hardest to stop thinking like, if I do this, it's going to burn some calories. I
Yeah.
better get my heart rate up. It's going to check that box. It's going to undo whatever I accidentally ate. Like, block those thoughts out and just be like, no, let me just sit in this gentle routine and see how that feels
Yeah.
and really enjoy that feeling.
Yeah, and I think what's really tough is that building any habit, it's a slow process and it is something that requires consistency and sticking to it for a long time. You mentioned something earlier on that a lot of people, they're comparing themselves to someone who has been building this habit and this routine into their lifestyle for years. And a lot of people will compare their chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 20. And I remember once I
Right.
was working with one of my clients and she wanted to get back into exercise. And the first thing I always ask is, let's start with where you're at right now. What kind of movement
Right.
are you getting in your day? Because if you're starting at zero, we're not going to move on to 3 or 4 or 5 times a week. So I think we started with like a 5 minute walk every day, and that's it. And for anyone who
Yes.
has like is looking at that end goal of, well, I want to end up doing 45 minutes 5 times a week, what is 5 minute walk going to do for me? The point of building a habit is not to think of the finish line right away. It's to think of
Right.
what's the next step that I can take and that I can stick to consistently, so that when I feel comfortable and it feels easy enough for me, then I can move up and then I can start moving closer to that finish line whenever you get to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's that long-term, what I like to call that wise mindset of understanding this is a long game. What I accomplish in 30 days, like that really doesn't matter. I really care who I am, like the type of a person I'm going to be a year from now, and that really matters to me. And so what type of habit do I need to do today that's going to help me get there? And especially when you're starting out, do something that's familiar, something that has the lowest barrier to entry. And for most women, it is just getting out the door and going for a 5 minute walk
Yeah.
and understanding like that's not nothing. Like the health benefits of just that simple like 5 to 10 minute walk are remarkable. Studies have recently shown that that short of a walk can help reduce blood pressure. It can help manage your blood sugar levels so that your insulin is not so whacked out. It's that extra movement that encourages good posture and good core strength. Plus, what going for, especially an outdoor walk, what that does for your stress and mood is significant. And so we see a lot of those chronically elevated stress hormones in women dramatically reduced when you just go for these simple 5 to 10 minute walks. And so I think we need to internalize and realize like, this is actually accomplishing a lot. And so I need to be okay with the fact that this is where I'm starting because this is worth doing these small 5 to 10 minute walks. So let's start with that. Start with something that has that lowest barrier to entry where it's familiar. You don't have to learn new technique. You just have to put on your shoes and go and wrap that habit with a little bit more intention and routine. That way, you start to fall into a good rhythm with a routine. And so I say, hey, pick the same meal each day to go for a walk after, if that's lunch. Sometimes using meal times is a good, I don't like to say the word trigger, but more as like a cue, like
Like an
I do this, then I
anchor.
do that.
Yeah.
Exactly. Anchor. That's a much better word. So it's like, I do this and then I do that, just so it's now part of a rhythm. Or I really like to go for a walk at the end of my work day. So at 5 o'clock, I shut my computer, I get outside and I go for a walk. So that's another anchor.
Mhm.
And so starting to wrap that 5 to 10 minute daily walk with some sort of a routine, now we have something that's starting to take shape. Now you're doing something every day. You are prioritizing movement. And now we can now we've got something to work with. It's like, okay, now we can maybe fine tune what some of those days look like. So now we know we eventually want to get you moving in the direction of doing some sort of functional strength training, functional muscle activity work, some mobility, some um, things that work on every aspect of your fitness. Walking just isn't quite enough. Eventually we got to do a little bit more thorough of a job for your body. But maybe we take one of those walking days and say, hey, instead of walking today, I am going to do these 3 stretches that are for my posture, or I'm going to do these few muscle building movements, or I'm going to work on my balance and coordination a little bit. So you started with something that created a structure and a routine. And then now we can kind of tweak what those things look like within that. And that's how you get the ball rolling. That's how you move in that direction where a year from now, you're like, whoa, I'm actually someone that's easily working out almost every day of the week. And it doesn't feel like punishment. It's something I really enjoy. And somewhere along the way, now I am like strength training 2 or 3 times a week, and I'm doing these mobility stuff. And who am I? I love getting that from people. It's like, how did I become this person that just enjoys exercising? And now it's intrinsic. Now it's easy. That's how you
It's
do it.
natural. Yeah. And what you described is what James Clear describes in Atomic Habits, which is habit stacking. So for anyone,
Exactly.
just to kind of summarize all of that, for let's say someone is struggling, they're not exercising at all right now. Number one is pick a habit or pick something that you already do consistently and naturally every day. So you mentioned at the end of the workday, 5 p.m. I know for me, I go for a walk before my lunch every day. So for
Great.
just picking one thing, maybe it's when you get home from work, before you even sit on the couch, just putting on your running shoes and going for a 5-minute walk, finding something that you already do naturally, and then adding something that you don't do naturally. Therefore, they kind of merge together to become this superpower because they become an item. And then once you can do that consistently, and you want to make sure that that new habit of walking becomes natural and intrinsic for you, that's when you can start venturing into, okay, maybe I can add some diversity. Maybe I can start doing some mobility or some stretching. And again, making sure that just because you have your walking down packed, then you're not, again, going that all or nothing mentality of saying, okay, well, now I'm going to do strength training every day instead of walking. Maybe just start with 1 day a week, where instead of going for a walk that day, you do a strength training exercise, or you dance, or you do something different. And as you start playing around with it, and one thing that I always tell my clients when they're starting a new habit is ask yourself, on a scale from 1 to 10, how confident are you that you can maintain this week? And if it's not a 7 or 10 or above, then make it easier. So I think
Make it easier. Yeah.
starting there is so helpful for anyone who's really just feeling intimidated by even just starting to work out. Having something that is so easy and natural for you to do is a really good starting point.
Well, and the other thing I really love about the habit stacking model too is now you have something that has clear like structure to it. Like you started with a foundation piece, right? We started with just going for a 5-minute walk at the end of the day or before lunch. That was kind of like the foundation. And then we added to that. We added in some mobility work one day. We added in some core exercises one day, so we added up. And so we start to build like a structure. Now we have this structure that has a lot of habits that look fantastic. They look really impressive. You're excited about it. But here's the thing that we do a lot, and this is a classic self-sabotaging maneuver. And this is what I like to call the toddler tantrum. It's like when a toddler builds a block of towers and they realize that the top one is kind of tippy and not staying up there very well, they walk up to the entire tower and kick the entire thing over.
Yes.
They throw a huge tantrum. But in that, and we do that. That's how we self-sabotage. We're like, oh my goodness, I can't get all 5 of my 45-minute long strength training workouts in this week. So I'm not going to do any of them. That goes back to that all or nothing mentality of like, I am all in or I'm not doing anything. And that is the most common way that we sabotage. But if you took the time to habit stack, to put one habit on top of the next one, then when you get in those tricky situations where you don't have the time, you don't have the energy, life is throwing you curveballs, just remove the uppermost blocks of your habits, the most complicated, the most advanced skills, until you get to a layer that is doable. 99% of the time, that 5-minute walk is still doable.
Yeah.
In most situations. And so you're still in the game. Like you're not having to do this all or nothing anymore. It's almost like you just shift and flex and realize, hey, this is a week where my entire block of habits are happening. And that's awesome. That feels great. Next week is a week that maybe only half of these habits happen. Still worth doing.
Yes, that's it. You just brought up something that I have a very real life example to help people understand this. So I have a morning routine that someone from the outside would look at and think it's very intimidating, because what they're seeing is years and years of habit stacking that has come together to create a morning routine where I wake up around the same time, I do some stretching, I meditate for a little bit, I journal, I do some kind of movement, and then I have my breakfast ready and I start my work. And those all of those pieces, that block that you were talking about, they got added one at a time. What first started as I wake up, I do a little bit of movement, whether that's exercise or go for a walk. I shower, eat my breakfast, and then I start my work. And then I was like, okay, well, let me try to do some journaling in the morning. And I added that. And then I added meditation. But those are more of those last pieces that got added on. And I know that for me, on those mornings where, for example, this morning, I knew I had a lot of work to get done and I didn't know if I would be able to get all of those pieces put into my morning, I just started with, I'm going to work out, I'm going to shower, and I'm going to start work. And meditation and journaling today, I'm not going to have time to do it. And I'm not looking at it as, okay, well, that means I'm just not good at meditating and journaling and I'm never going to do it again. It was just today, those pieces had to be put aside. And tomorrow, when you can remove the guilt and the shame from not following through on a habit for one day, and you don't make it mean something about you, that you're a failure, that you're inconsistent, that you're not disciplined, and you can just look at it objectively, then all those negative emotions that usually tend to that self-sabotage go away, and you can get right back. I don't like saying back on track because that's not the way I see it at all, but get right back into your routine tomorrow. And if you don't, then the day after that is going to be a new day.
100%. And I think what you're describing there is there's a gap between your capability and your capacity. In any given moment in time, your capability does not always equal your capacity. And I think that's where we get so like off track, is that we look at ourselves and say, I know I'm capable of this. I know that I'm a strong woman. I know that I'm organized. I know that I can be consistent in other areas. I know that, this whole list of things that we believe about ourselves that are probably true. That's our huge pile of capabilities. Like these are the things you're capable of. And a lot of us have some big capabilities in our rear view mirror. Like I remember that one time I ran that half marathon, or I trained for that half marathon. I don't know what it is. Most of us have this like half marathon.
I have the same thing. I have the exact same thing. When you said half marathon, I was like, oh, I have that in my rear view mirror. Do I want to do it again? Absolutely not. But I know that I'm capable of doing it.
You're capable of it. And so you have this like reminder of what you are physically capable of. And we feel like that's like what we should be doing all the time. And that's not true. It doesn't mean that that you have the capacity to do that in this season of life. Mm-hmm. It says nothing about your capabilities. It doesn't mean that you're not a good enough person, or that you're not strong enough. You're not good enough. It just means that in this season of life, maybe just today, you don't have the capacity for that. That's not a moral right or wrong issue. It's just you might have kids that are draining you. You might have a tight work schedule that is limiting your capacity to go train for a half marathon. And so we need to understand that there is always going to be this gap between what you're physically capable of doing, mentally capable of doing, maybe even, and your actual capacity right now. And what fills that gap is grace. You have got to give yourself grace to say, it's okay. It's okay. Like, let me use those past capabilities to remind me of how strong I actually am as a woman, but that's not something I have to do right now.
Yeah.
Just ask yourself, like, what I'm doing now is what I can do right now, and that is good enough. And I got to give myself grace for what feels like is getting missed. And that is, it's hard. It is a humbling process. But the
Yeah.
more we can continue to give ourselves grace every day is so important. And in every single one of my programs that I coach women through, there is a habit that especially in the beginning, like I'm really adamant about it. I'm like, we have to do this every single day. And that habit is at the end of every day, I need you to notice your victory.
I do the
We're
same thing.
good. Oh, so good, because we are so good at looking back and saying, oh, I didn't do this. I didn't do that. These are all the things on my to-do list that didn't get done. And we dwell on our failures more than we dwell on anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And the moment we can start switching our mindset and be like, but wait a minute, what did I do today? What did I do? Maybe I didn't do the full 5-minute walk, but did I like do a stretch while I was at the kitchen sink? And that's great.
And
That I still have something to celebrate.
and especially for moms, I work with a lot of moms, and I would say that a lot of moms don't even notice the amount of movement that they really do get in a day, just from
Yes.
cooking and doing laundry and gardening and picking the kids up. And so if you're not able to look back and be like, okay, well, I went for a 5-minute walk, what is all the movement that you did get through the day? Because I think a lot
Exactly.
of us think that if I recognize the smallest wins, then I'm giving myself too much grace, or I'm letting myself off the hook. But really, you probably have around the same kind of audience as I do. We work with people who are really good at shaming themselves, who are really good at beating themselves up and not letting themselves off the hook. And the more that you focus on the things that you're not doing well and your failures, the more you're giving your brain that information of, show me more of this, show me more failures, show me more things that I'm not doing well. And it starts becoming your identity. Instead of today I failed, it's today I was a failure. And when you think you're a failure, you're going to act consistently with someone who's a failure. So when you start to try to do a new exercise routine, well, you're going to have that little voice in your head that's saying you probably shouldn't even try, because you're not going to be able to stick to it because you failed every time in the past.
Right. And we like to avoid negative feelings. And so if that is our feeling all the time, with every time I show up and take care of myself, I just fall short. I'm such a failure. I can't do it. I can't stick with anything. Like, that starts to become our truth. It becomes a reality. And so we're like, I just don't want to experience that again. And there's a lot of women that will want to start working with me and start training with me. And they're just like, I just don't think I'm going to be able to do it. I'm like, well, maybe we change that experience, and maybe we go about it a completely different way, where you actually come out of the gate with an instant win. And with the nutrition coaching that I do, sometimes it's probably super similar to yours. It's like, day one, we just add a glass of water at lunch. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that is all we are going to work on. It's not a food thing, so there's nothing emotional with it. It's something super simple. It's anchored to something else. We do the same thing with the fitness piece. It's like, day one, we're literally going to do 4 movements, and 2 of them are stretches. That's it. That's it. Bye. Good job. You showed up. Day 3, is nothing. It's a day off. And everybody's looking around like, that's it. I don't have to do anything today. It's like, no, I need you to get in this rhythm of having days that you show up and then days that you relax and days that you show, like having that rhythm. And it creates such a more positive association with it. And you start to realize, like, I'm doing this. I
Yeah.
can't believe it. And I love when women in my programs are like 2 weeks in, I like to just stop and be like, hey, wait up a second. When was the last time that you were this consistent at showing up for your health, like intentionally for your self care in the last few decades? And
Mhm.
everybody's like, I have never like done 10 days in a row of anything.
Mhm.
It's like, because it's so easy. It feels so good. And you are celebrating those wins every single day. And it's like, I can't wait to see what you've got for me tomorrow. Bring it on. I'm
Yeah.
excited.
Yeah. And I would say for anyone, like, write this down in your notes app on a piece of paper so you can remind yourself, like, I won't set myself up for failure. If you set
Yeah.
yourself up for failure, then you're setting yourself up to disappoint yourself and to beat yourself up. And like you said, to create this negative association with exercise. So set yourself up for success by making it so easy that you can literally trip on the habit. That's the way that I describe it to my clients. And oh my goodness,
I love it.
I love this conversation. And I honestly cannot believe that I've never done a podcast interview or a podcast episode on the topic of exercise, because this is something that I talk a lot about. And it's the way that you do one thing is the way that you do everything. If you have an all or nothing mentality when it comes to food, you have an all or nothing mentality when it comes to exercise. So thank you so much, Megan, for coming on and talking about the mindset behind it, because I don't really want you to come on here and tell me about how many squats or the form of a lunge that my client should be doing. I think that that could be helpful at different stages, but not necessarily for where my audience is at. And I think that talking about what goes on behind the scenes is especially important. And I really want to highlight the fact that anyone who's listening right now, stop comparing your chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 20. A lot of things happened slowly to get to that point. And the best time to start with something so small, like even if going for a walk for 5 minutes is too intimidating, start by putting your running shoes on and stepping outside. Do that every day this week. That's it. Do that every day this week. So simple and so easy that you will literally trip over that habit and then build from there. So if you had to say one last piece of advice or wisdom to my audience, what would you say?
Oh boy, there are so many things that I could, sum this up with, but you're so right that like mindset is kind of the beginning of it all. And if you don't have your mind in the right place about fitness, and to be honest, like be honest with yourself, like really check in and be like, boy, what is my relationship with fitness actually like? If it's not in a good place, like you shouldn't be caring about your lunge technique. You're absolutely right. Like it's deeper than that. And so do the hard work of getting your mindset correct. And it might mean that you have to go back to the starting line. And that's not a poor thing. That's not, doesn't say anything about your character. It just means that you're going to do it different this time. You're going to do it. You're going to be team tortoise.
Yes.
So, I think if anybody wants to remember just like, something really easy to just tell themselves throughout the day is like team tortoise. I'm team tortoise.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And for anyone who wants to connect with you, I know that you have your own podcast that I will be a guest on. And I know that you're on Instagram as well. Where can people find you?
Yeah, definitely the podcast. So Self Care Simplified is our podcast, and it's everything we just talked about today. Like if you need a really positive place to learn about your body and good, sustainable fitness, especially as you age and as your body just feels like, man, it's not operating like I'm 20 anymore. Definitely come listen. We've got 2 episodes going out every single week. And then for sure over on Instagram, that's where I am posting videos of movements every single day that feel good. And my mission is to show women that moving your body in these very intentional ways is not punishment. It feels good. So I'm constantly showing awesome stretches and movements, and I carefully explain things in a way that you're confident. And so definitely come check me out on Instagram. I'm just Megan Dahlman, just all one word. Yeah.
Perfect. And I will, of course, put all of that in the show notes so that it's easy to find. Thank you so much, Megan, for being here. Thanks to all you listeners for listening. I'm so grateful for every single one of you, and we will see you on the next episode. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you found it valuable, I would love if you would share it with someone you know that could benefit. If you're loving the show, don't forget to subscribe over on Apple Podcasts so you don't miss a single episode. I really love hearing feedback from you, so please leave a rating and review over on Apple to help us get in the ears of more people who need it the most. Finally, come hang out with me on Instagram at Sabrina Magnan Health for more educational content and get up close and personal with me. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you on the next episode.